Welcome back to Gamo Theories, where I introduce theories of management, administration, and leadership. This is episode 35. Today, we'll explore psychological contract theory. Unlike formal contracts, the invisible psychological contract transcends written agreements. Psychological contract theory explains the unspoken, mutually held beliefs and expectations between employers and employees, shaping their relationship and influencing workplace dynamics. The psychological contract theory was developed by organizational scholar Denise Russo in 1989, but its origin can be traced back even further. Chris Argyris, in his 1960 book, used the term psychological work contract to describe the implicit agreement between employees and their supervisors. This agreement, when honored by the supervisor, ensured that employees would continue to put in effort and perform well. In 1989, Denise Russo reconceptualized the concept of psychological work contract, and her 1989 article marked a significant transition in the development of psychological contract theory. She defined the psychological contract as people's beliefs about the terms and conditions of a reciprocal exchange agreement between themselves and another party. What set her conceptualization apart from earlier ones was her assertion that psychological contract obligations were based on promises, and it was the exchange of these promises between employees and employers that drove the development and maintenance of the psychological contract. Russo also presented psychological contracts as an individual level phenomenon, which made the construct more testable. She also introduced the concept of psychological contract violation, which occurs when one party fails to fulfill their promised obligations. Her 1995 book further expanded on psychological contract theory. This work coincided with significant changes in employment due to global competition, economic deregulation, and organizational restructuring. What is psychological contract exactly? It refers to the unwritten, implicit expectations, beliefs, and obligations that exist between an employer and an employee. It's the mutual understanding and perception of what each party expects from the employment relationship. Unlike the formal, legally binding contract of employment, the psychological contract operates at a more psychological and emotional level. Imagine starting a new job with certain beliefs about our obligations as employees, such as being loyal and working in the best interest of the company. We also have expectations that our employers will provide us with opportunities for skill development and competitive wages. These initial perceptions are shaped by promises made during recruitment, but the specific details of our psychological contract remain elusive since the nature of employment can be uncertain. As time goes on, our psychological contracts begin to take shape, evolving and adapting based on new experiences and information. While the recruitment process sets the foundation, it's our post entry experiences that have the greatest impact on our psychological contracts. Our beliefs are continuously influenced by various sources within the organization, including recruiters, supervisors, formal policies, human resource practices, and the interaction we have with our coworkers. The psychological contract is formed through various interactions, experiences, and communication between the employer and the employee. It includes factors such as job security, career development opportunities, work life balance, recognition, trust, and the overall treatment and support provided by the organization. It goes beyond explicit job responsibilities and salary. At the heart of psychological contract theory lies the understanding that our beliefs represent a mutual exchange of obligations between us as employees and the organization we work for. These perceived obligations profoundly influence our feelings, attitudes, and behaviors toward each other. The obligations within our psychological contracts can vary widely. For example, in a transactional psychological contract, an hourly worker hired temporarily to handle holiday package shipping might have purely economic obligations, like receiving fair wages. On the other hand, in a relational psychological contract, we have obligations that go beyond economics, including personal support and opportunities for development. Regardless of the specific content, our ideal psychological contract thrives on mutuality. Both parties hold common beliefs about their organizations. It relies on reciprocity, where our obligations are seen as equal and fair, and alignment, where the contract maintains a balanced reciprocity of obligations between employees and employers. These characteristics foster positive evaluations of psychological contract fulfillment and elicit positive reactions from us as employees. Achieving such a harmonious psychological contract requires open communication, trust, and consistent signals that reinforce the essence of the contract. However, creating and sustaining these vibrant psychological contracts remains an ongoing challenge for organizations. When we have direct experiences with our supervisors and managers, it triggers a type of thinking that requires effort. For example, when we have positive interactions with our supervisors, such as receiving the recognition they promised us, it gives us a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. On the other hand, when those promises go unfulfilled, it can lead to frustration and disappointment. These experiences shape how we view our relationship with our employer and greatly influence how we respond to requests or opportunities to contribute. If we believe that our employer has consistently fulfilled their commitments to us in the past, we are more likely to see our employment as a long-term relationship. This makes us more willing to respond positively to requests and contribute in new and innovative ways. However, if past commitments have not been fulfilled, it diminishes our sense of obligation towards the employer, and we start questioning our beliefs about the relationship. When our obligations are not met, it increases our suspicions and make us more vigilant, which in turn reduces the perceived value of our employment arrangement. The evaluation of psychological contract fulfillment has a significant impact on our attitudes, emotions, and behaviors as employees. Generally, when our psychological contract is fulfilled, it leads to positive outcomes for both us and the company we work for. On the contrary, when there is a breach in the psychological contract, where one party fails to fulfill their obligations, such as when our employer fails to promote us despite previous promises, it results in negative outcomes. Breach can occur to different degrees. It is important to note that breach is different from a deliberate violation, which is a willful failure to honor commitment. Violation triggers negative emotional reactions like anger, outrage, disappointment, and frustration, which are collectively known as feelings of violation. Although feelings of violation and breach are related, they are distinct from each other. The extent to which a breach leads to feelings of violation depends on how we interpret the breach. If we perceive the breach as something that the organization could have controlled, but it chose not to, it will result in stronger feelings of violation. Several factors influence how we perceive and respond to a breach of a psychological contract. First, breaches are more likely to occur in employment situations where there are limited interactions between us as employees and the organizational agents, such as a lack of socialization and mentoring activities. In this case, breaches tend to be more common. Second, breaches that evoke strong emotions are more noticeable, and this effect is associated with certain personality traits. For example, individuals with higher levels of neuroticism or an external locus of control tend to perceive higher level of breach. Moreover, personality traits also play a role in the severity of our reactions after a breach occurs. Individuals with higher equity sensitivity or internal locus of control tend to experience stronger feelings of violation. Third, the organization can take certain measures to mitigate negative reactions from us when a breach occurs. This includes fostering high-quality social relationships with us, offering special perks or deals that are tailored to our needs, and providing explanations that are justified by resource constraints. These actions can help reduce our negative reactions to a breach and maintain a positive employee-employer relationship. No theory is perfect. Psychological contract theory has faced several criticisms within the field of organizational research. First, critics argue that psychological contract theory lacks precision and clarity in defining and measuring psychological contracts. For example, different studies use different definitions and measurement approaches, making it a challenge to compare and synthesize findings. This lack of standardization limits the ability to draw definitive conclusions and develop a comprehensive understanding of psychological contracts. Second, critics argue that psychological contract theory has often focused predominantly on the employee's perspective, neglecting the employer's viewpoint and obligations. For example, the theory does not adequately address the organizational expectations and obligations that contribute to the formation and maintenance of psychological contracts. A more balanced approach, considering both employee and employer perspectives, would provide a more comprehensive understanding of the employment relationship. Third, critics suggest that psychological contract theory falls short in providing clear and actionable guidance for managers and organizations. For example, this theory does not offer specific strategies or interventions to effectively manage psychological contracts. Organizations need practical implications and recommendations to foster positive psychological contract relationships, such as promoting open communication, providing opportunities for career development, and recognizing and rewarding employees for their contributions. These criticisms raised against psychological contract theory emphasize the need for further theory development, empirical research, consideration of contextual factors, and practical implications to strengthen the theory's application and relevance in organizational settings. Thanks for watching this video on psychological contract theory. If you're interested in learning more about theories of management, administration, and leadership, be sure to tune in into my future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. If you want to know more about how to build a theoretical framework for your research, check out my book titled Demystify Theories, a workbook for developing theoretical frameworks of educational leadership research. The link of the book is in the description below.